for many of you, these are already late hours. But believe me, the time you will invest today is worth of investing. If particularly you're interested in the next generation of the monitoring or in the next generation of clinical trial management, and if you are interested in understanding what it would bring for me and for our company. So I will try to be as concise as possible today and bring only the highlights and the most important points of such concepts as risk-based monitoring, as risk management, and as quality by design. I hope you can see, everybody can see the slide. Yes, great. So first of all, I want to begin our presentation with the basic topic, what we are going to cover today. So we are starting with some discussion about centralized monitoring challenges. First of all, why we do centralized monitoring. And centralized monitoring is one part of the RBM. So it's not the full RBM, but it's like on the subpart. We can speak about triggered and targeted monitoring on the later stages. Then we come to a question, what is RBM in general? So there are lots of misunderstandings and different interpretations. We will try to dot the I's and cross the T's and really bring one concise and precise definition of that. And the third question, what I'm going to answer today is what are the results for everybody of you? Why it is reasonable to think about, or why it is not reasonable to think about, or why what is inside of this methodology, and how each clinical trial can benefit from that. Please don't forget to use the chat for asking as many questions as you like, and please really use this opportunity to build up a dialogue, and to have kind of clarifying your questions, maybe that you had before, or that will appear during my presentations today. We are going we are going to spend 1 hour, and this is very complicated to cover all these questions within this time short. Probably it's important to understand that today you will hear only the highlights, only the main general topics. So for every detail, we will have to maybe build up a separate discussion. So I'm going to start with one question: who we are and why we are doing what we do, and why we speak about RBM in generally. My team and I have been working in risk management and risk-based monitoring for at least 6 years. We had previously we were a data quality group of ERT, e-research technology. So we were dealing with hundreds of clinical trials for all big pharma. And during this time period, we have established a methodology how to identify certain defects and discrepancies. At that days, nobody has thought about RBM at all. That's why we just captured every mechanism for identification of certain discrepancies and misconducts, and suddenly realized that there is a connection between risks and the data. And that's how Syntegrity appeared. Syntegrity is clinical integrity, which is nothing more than finding so-called a butterfly effect. Maybe you've heard about it before. Butterfly effect in a clinical trial. So that means slight hints of certain discrepancy that may result of a storm later on. That's why you can recognize a butterfly, oh no, a logo as well. Actually speaking more simple terms, we're helping to recognize from this, we're helping to recognize something this. When we speak about centralized monitoring or monitoring in general, there are certain challenges that every pharma company faces. And these challenges are connected with the amount of data which we are capturing now, connected with the human, effect that so many participants are involved. They are so different. There are so many cultural differences between. So in these huge projects, and that's actually result in certain effects that occur in clinical trials. And let us review some of the challenges that we have. First, what I want to start with is our clinical sites are not equal among each other. So if we will speak about certain percentages of clinical sites that bring us difficulties, we come to a so-called Pareto rule, which tells 20% of sites, of clinical sites, will result in 80% of difficulties that we will have in a clinical trial. The challenge is to identify these 20% of sites and to know that more in the beginning, to help them to improve if it's possible, or to get rid of them if it's not possible during the trial or in the next trial. Next challenge that we all face today are the huge amount of third-party data recording systems and third-party data in general that we are facing today in clinical trials. We have EDC in the center, but a part of EDC we have central labs, medical coding, pharmacokinetics, safety information, which is usually stored in safety databases. All of them, they have different dynamics and different processes dealing with the data. For example, a safety database, they always, so safety, they are dealing with with such processes as when certain issue begins, it has continuation, so adverse events happens. They are following a patient through a certain procedure and helping or seeing if kind of different side effects appear again and again. Whereas EDC is more snapshots of data capturing from various recording systems, from various recording devices, and from various sites. Our central labs are more detailed information about certain measurements that are done, and might be they can be imported in EDC, or it could be that they are separately. It could be that they come later in EDC. So there is a huge variety of recording systems. On average, there are 5 to 7 recording systems. So in clinical trials, but of course the diversity of the data and the processes behind of this capturing are quite different. That's all result in discrepancies among these recorded systems and the complexity to manage that. I see some questions in between. Yes, the session is recorded. So please apply after the session so that you will get a link to these recordings. When we speak about capturing the data, it's always not to forget that there are some motivations that are not so genuine. And these motivations are influenced, or many of the stakeholders are influenced by this motivation. For example, a patient can participate in several clinical trials simultaneously just to get some gains from all of these trials. Site can manipulate the data if, for example, they have troubles with the recruitments, or if a site wishes to show a better recruitment ratio. Of course, there is some monetary gain behind recruitment as well for a site. CRO can hide certain errors, particularly if these errors are connected with their activities. So based on the internal trial of Boehringer Ingelheim, we can speak that at least 10% of clinical trial data is affected by misconduct and fraud at sites. Add to that professional patients, add to that CRO manipulations and export difficulties, data export difficulties, and you will land to 20–30% of data which is affected. So it's a huge amount where dirty data, so to say, can influence dramatically the results of clinical trials. Each of these component influence statistical significance that we get, influence confidence intervals of clinical trials. So our confidence intervals goes wider and wider and wider. So we have less chances to get statistical significance at the end. So that's please don't forget about recruitment ratios and recruitment dynamics. Just based on various studies, the 30% of sites never recruit a single patient on average. Many seasonal breaks, like we all know, in June, July, almost no recruitment happened, or in August. And in the year of December, right now, the recruitment rates go down. So how to manage your trial with taking in consideration of these challenges? So again, we were speaking about dirty data, we were speaking about recruitment challenges, diversity of recording systems. So all these difficulties create some burdens on the way of a clinical trial manager. So when we near end of the clinical trial, many of us know that actually the last push, so to say, the last 5% of getting the data is just probably the hardest. If I will show you the diagram, how the stress levels go through the clinical trial, they usually start with the high stress level. So clinical trial starts, we are trying to plan everything, we're trying to create a solid protocol to fix all the issues that are possible, compliance issues, and if they exist. And we are aiming to first patient, first visit deadline. And when we have done, there is a huge relief happens. So there's really many team members really relax. So this is a typical study development. And when we near database closure, suddenly certain difficulties appear. So, and the stress level goes up again, just because there are so many missing data in our databases, and there are some discrepancies that we identified already, and we need to clean this up altogether in order to close the database in a timely manner. So the whole principle of quality by design, risk management, and risk-based monitoring are dedicated to reduce the second level of stress and use the time during the trial to be more prepared and more proactive for trial management. It starts even before a trial is before first patient first in. So and the questions, the risk assessments begin even before protocol is finalized. Why it is important to begin earlier? Because on the one hand side, we can mitigate a lot, and these mitigation actions are quite easy for us. Of course, on the other hand side, we have still enough resources, time, money, and our team to take these actions and to focus these actions actually on certain areas. So when we speak about risk-based monitoring, what we understand behind, what it is actually, let us clarify the terms and let us agree on these terms, because without understanding the terms, we cannot discuss this topic at all. When we ask these questions among our teams, we see that everybody of us understands this topic differently. For example, if you speak about with the QA team, they always think, oh, we probably need to start again. We will need to just start our education, or just CRA think that we all be fired. Probably it's end of our career. Some data management say finally they have understood the power of data. That's good thing. So it's our time now. Yes. Again, project management says again some new stuff. Maybe we can just ignore that. So CEO says, you know what, guys, please concentrate on the goal. It's still needed to be done. Risk management is nice stuff, but like keep an eye on the goal. And many say, yeah, what is new here? We always done this way. It's it's actually quite a common sense, and why everybody is so excited about it. We always identify those sites who are like high risky sites, and we always configured our monitoring somehow there. So there is as you see, there are a lot of different opinions what risk-based monitoring really is and why it means for them. So please, if you have any questions, use the chat on the right side and use this opportunity actually to ask the questions. Recently, there was a very interesting questionnaire asked by Quintiles among their customers. What RBM implementation drivers actually do you have? Interestingly, that the biggest motivation behind RBM was reducing of monitoring costs. Reduced CRA travel costs, which is actually somehow connected with the first point, and only third was mitigated risk. I must say, looking at this graph, I definitely see that there is some kind of misunderstanding. Just imagine an example. You would wish to fly, for example, from America to Europe to spend your vacation, and you buy a ticket for a flight, and you come to I don't know some airlines and ask for a ticket, and they provide to you 2 tickets. One costs, for example, $1,000 and another costs 500. And when you want to buy the second one, which is cheaper, they say, you know what, actually these flights are crash every second time. What would you choose? My question. Yeah. So how can we combine the costs and the risks? So we assuming and buying the tickets for flights, we always assume that the flights are absolutely secure. And maybe why the airlines different in their pricing? Maybe that because they just the service, additional service is quite different. Some of them are cheaper, so optimize their cost. Others are more luxury, so they provide more services for their passengers. But none of the airlines actually can say that they provide less safer flights as others. That's why the whole risk management methodology is not dedicated to save costs. Saving costs happens automatically on a long run when you run risk management methodology and risk management actions, and that happens with airlines, by the way, as well. So we see that the tickets historically were, so the price for the tickets go down, 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 down. And actually recently Ryanair, this one, the European airlines, even announced that they will provide tickets for free. So just imagine that we will reach some point, then clinical trials will be completely free. Just could be done for free. So that's the level of, so to say, which we can aim to and learn, and the motivations and implementation drivers we need to pick up with the understanding of those aims and goals that could be achieved. So again, thinking in terms of the risk management or in terms of the risk-based monitoring, please do not take the cost savings as the ultimate goal or implementation driver. So if you take it, the whole implementation will be flawed already. Yeah, I see already the first question, which asks, are there any study conducted that RBM saves a certain amount of costs, 10 or 20. I must say many trials which are known for me were tried to prove the saving costs. There was some trial from PricewaterhouseCoopers, or there was some claim and the publication from PricewaterhouseCoopers that after analysis they came to a saving of 18%. But none of the trial that I know till now could not prove that in a real, genuine scientific way. So even more, many of the implementation of RBM will result in more cost in the beginning. So you should count with at least 5% of more cost in the first 1-2 trials. You will see reduction in the third, in the fourth trial, but again, speaking about the cost implementation as or cost reduction as a implementation driver for RBM, to my mind, absolutely flawed, and that's actually the sign that the implementation probably will be disastrous, and we see that every day, really. Different sponsors and companies come to us and they speak about so-called RBM relaunching. That's already a topic, that's already a term inside of at least of our company, but I'm afraid even within industry. And that happens because actually many companies started implementation with the driver reduce the costs, monitoring costs. That's not how it should be approached. And that's why they land with this huge number of critical findings That's why they have to relaunch RBM, and they have to start thinking about risks first, about mitigating actions first, and about really scientifically sound methodology how monitoring could be reduced. So I see next question. If we assume a good mix of good and not so good sites, the cost can be assumed to be neutral. We will come to, in a later slides, we will come to adventures or the benefits of risk-based monitoring, and you will see where there is the potential, why it is reasonable to start thinking about it, apart that RBM has become required by regulatory. So we will see that there are another types of performance indicators that could show to you that you have achieved success implementing RBM or risk management methodology. I continue with my slides, and we'll address the questions step by step. So I just wanted to notify or to say recently, a couple of weeks ago, the GCP addendum was finalized by ICH, and this GCP addendum says quite clearly that the sponsor should develop a systematic, prioritized risk management approach to monitoring clinical trials. Risk-based approach to monitoring clinical trials. So feel free to go to ICH website and take a look there. So the GCP starts affecting us from the June 2017. So that's where all auditors will take a look if your monitoring strategy are aligned with your risk assessments. If we will summarize very briefly and very high level what actually RBM really is, we can say that previously, traditionally, we had to visit different sites on a regular basis every 4th week. With our CRAs have done source data verification and some other activities to identify different issues. And now we got a new knowledge layer, so to say, knowledge layer of risk profiles of every site. And by the way, when I speak about risk profile of every site, I also mean that there is a risk profile of certain region, and there is a risk profile of my study, and there is even a risk profile of my portfolio. So please be not misguided by this slide. When I speak about these additional risk profiles of site, I really understand and mean that we have risk profile for a site, for a trial, for a geographical region, and for a whole portfolio of my trials. And using this additional information, we can do reduced, triggered, targeted, and centralized monitoring. Actually, that's what RBM is that we get this additional information, and by means of that, we apply certain tools that we have. And these tools are reduced monitoring, triggered monitoring, targeted monitoring, and actually as an overall term, centralized monitoring. That means certain consequences for everybody of us. First of all, we need to identify these risk profiles. We need to identify these risks in our trial overall. We need to define new roles like central monitor or risk monitor or risk manager. And we need to assign certain leaders, certain people. We need to go through a change management process just for team to accept this methodology. We need to build up certain technology to be able to implement centralized monitoring, to be able to grab certain risk-relevant information from all recording systems that we have here. So there is a lot of things to do. And if you remember regulatory, June 2017, it's time to start if you didn't start before. It's a lot of things to take care about. New roles needed to be defined, new SOPs needed to be defined, new methods implemented in the clinical trials. So lots of things to do. And please be aware that all these new methodologies, new concepts, new technologies, they all bring risks with themselves. So if you misunderstand and if you implement it in the wrong way, you will bring more risks in your trial as you had before. So the question is how to implement it in such a way that you will only get the benefits, not the additional risks. When we speak about the whole risks that appear on our landscape, we usually identify external risks that happen outside the company and internal risks. So the internal risks are connected with the internal processes, internal procedures, internal compliance, with the staff turnover, with the overload. And external risks are more political, geographical, complexity risks of a trial. And I must say, if you are a smaller company, then probably you will be more affected by the internal risks. If you're a bigger giant company, then probably you need to be aware about external risks more, because you're more vulnerable to external risks. When we build up a risk defense strategy, so to say, for our trial, we need to be sure that we captured all the aspects of those issues that can go wrong. So just imagine you're planning a trip, and we started this with example with airlines. Just imagine you're going to spend your vacation somewhere in Africa. So there are many risks which combined with this trip. So how would you address personally this trip? So first of all, to my mind, if I would do that, I would probably think what can go wrong first, just in general. I could be I'll run out of money. I could be run out of some connections, maybe some difficulties with water, some digestional problems. So I will summarize everything that can happen. Maybe I'm doing it even subconsciously, without like structural mechanism that are implemented, for example, in other industries. But when I do that, I start thinking about some mitigating actions. Okay, if I will have some difficulties with connection with a mobile phone, for example, maybe I need to think about some satellite connection. If I will have some digestional problems, maybe I need to take some pills with me, which will help me to go through some food poisoning. If I will have some troubles having lack of cash, maybe I need to take my credit cards with me, or I need maybe to take some gold in order to be able at least to sell it if everything goes wrong. So you start thinking, okay, what should be done right now before even trip begins in order to mitigate these risks that can happen in the future. So and similarly, you approach clinical trials. You start thinking, what can go wrong? And how do we just help, or how do we approach it in its integrity? We start looking at primary outcome measures. We start thinking about sponsor-specific risks. So what was in the past that has gone already wrong before, when you've done your clinical trials? Did you had some fraud issues? Did you had some non-compliance? Did you had some issues with the recruitment and? Then we continue with the study-specific risks. For example, if it's an oncology trial, you might be looking on certain risks like suicidality in a trial, or if it's, for example, a trial for just dedicated to cardiology, maybe you might take a look on the QT prolongation parameter there to forecast certain risks with the heart attack. So, of course, we will take a look on the safety. So all the issues connected with adverse events, with the serious adverse events, with the SUSARs, this is very important to take care. Then so-called project management risks like recruitment, milestones, even budgeting could be in this group. And we ground everything on protocol compliance, and we ground everything on misconduct, sloppiness, and fraud detection. So that's how we approach these and integrity and build up a risk defense strategy for a clinical trial. So maybe let's address a couple of questions before I switch to the next trial. So we had. What is triggered monitoring? First, triggered monitoring means that you set up certain trigger, for example, risk indicator. When this risk indicator goes beyond certain thresholds, it triggers that certain monitoring activity must happen. For example, you can communicate with the site, just making a call, or you might be plan a special visit to a site. So this is a triggered monitoring. Targeted monitoring, maybe to make it clear, is when you select certain subset of sites which have certain commonality, and then you do certain actions to this subset of sites. So. Going to Pareto analysis, it's 20% data that requires more attention, which is already being covered under normal routine monitoring visits. So we are just looking at cost saving point only with RBM. It's true. I will have a couple of slides in the very end of the presentation, which might help answering you these questions about cost savings overall. Let's keep it for later. RBM is all about the focused approach and normal routine. Focus usually lost. Absolutely agree. RBM is about being focused on what matters. The question is how to identify what to focus at and what matters for you. I must say RBM is more also, as it actually contains risk inside of it. It's more about being proactive. Also, that means managing your monitoring in such a way that you will proactively identify the issues that didn't happen yet. So, or that you identify the issues in the very beginning. And I assume I have one of the slides about it. Maybe this one, yes. If you had a certain issue, that a problem can not disappear. The problem will only go exponentially. And that's where the action is needed. So there are two paths. One, that the problem can go really wrong. For example, we had recently one trial, we monitored data quality, and the site which acquired the most of the data actually produced a lot of dirty data. So there were rounding defects, there were missing information, there were discrepancies. So if we would identify this later in the later stages of a trial, probably it would be already too late, just because this site accumulated the most portion of the data. But being able to identify this in the middle or in the beginning of a trial, we were able to do some corrective actions and preventive actions, and to clarify that the site really started to produce more genuine and more high quality data. So what are the technologies the industry going to use to analyze the data part of Spotfire generic system? I will have a slide offering the RBM vendors, and Spotfire, to my mind, is not really an RBM vendor, but you will see the Spotfire on this slide as well. So we will address it right now. How can RBM efficiency be measured other than outside monitoring cost? Yeah, very good question. And the quality as compared to non-RBM studies. We will have the slide for that as well. I see that there are many questions are just, you're so excited that, actually you're following so our path actually, and you will see the answers just in a couple of minutes. I wanted to say that that when we speak about risks, we just grouped them to external, internal. But if we take a deeper look into their types, you will recognize that there are some study level risks connected with the, for example, toxicity of the drug, connected with the complexity of the trial. These risks are not really dynamic, so they stay the whole trial more or less the same. So we call them so-called fixed risks. So they don't change too much. But there are some risks that are more connected with the site level activities, like visits, unscheduled visits, certain acquisition of data, the timeliness of how fast the data arrived to a sponsor database. And there are some really operational risks, and these risks are very dynamic. For example, one of example is a fraud. So it really can escalate very fast and could be mitigated really fast. So these risks really you need to take care about during the trial. And that's why you need different approaches to tackle each of the type. So for more fixed risks, it's reasonable to assess them before the beginning and maybe during the trial regularly, for example, every half a year. We apply a Transcelerate risk assessment and categorization tool for that. So there are some other tools, and if you have interest, I can provide you more information on other alternatives. But for more dynamic risks, you need to grab the risk-relevant information during the trial, and you need to put certain data-driven KPIs, KRIs, so key risk indicators, key performance indicators. And do the assessment on a regular basis so that you will get notified when you should trigger your activities. Maybe let's skip a couple of slides in order to speed up, because we are nearing actually the end of the presentation. I mentioned Transcelerate's approach, and Transcelerate, many of you have heard about it. It's a big non-profit organization which unites 20 pharma companies, and they really deal with standardization of certain procedures. And risk management is one of their initiatives, and that's why they created a so-called risk assessment and categorization tool. Abbreviation is RAC, and they provide it for free. So you can download it from Transcelerate's website and make a risk assessment before even trial begins, and redo the risk assessment during your trial. Even more, Syntegrity, for example, provides a free cloud solution, which is available for everybody, and we guarantee it will be free, and feel free to use it. By using the cloud solution, you have some advantages. For example, you can use this cloud solution in your teams, and you have certain additional criteria how to choose what risk property. So you go through the questionnaire of RACT and you assess impact, probability, and detectability of each of the questions that might happen in your trial. The important thing is that it's reasonable to be clear what risk you are really assessing. And this is one, so by the way, so if you're going to utilize this free tool, it's RACT RBM Cloud. Feel free to register, and there are no charges behind it. The disadvantages of RACT Just Advantage, first of all. Advantage is very structured, very big pharma driven, if I may say, this is an advantage, but still a pretty complete way of assessing the risks. The disadvantage of React is that it's still very subjective, so you and your staff are assessing the risk, and the assessment could be really, could depend on their mood even. If they're in good mood, maybe the certain risk will be assessed as a lightweight, and certain risks other way around, and the next day when they are in bad mood, for example. That's why it's important to involve many stakeholders, to review several times, and to come to a certain consensus. Me personally, I'm not very great fan of React, just because it's not very quantitative, and we prefer more the methodology connected with the probabilities of the risks. And the probabilities means that we go into historical data and take and calculate probability of each of the individual risks that might happen, and based on these probabilities we decide what risk we should not mitigate. So again, React is more a categorical tool that you can use and utilize immediately. They are free, and there are lots of solutions for that. Probability is a more complicated but more scientifically sound way to deal with that. And again, we are happy to make discussion if somebody is interested in that. Somebody has asked why or how to measure RBM success in general, if not speaking about risks. You will definitely be able to measure the success of RBM using certain KPIs in your trial. For example, I will guarantee if you will implement RBM in a standardized, holistic way, and holistic means involving stakeholders, involving different risk categories, analyzing and doing it rigorously, repeatedly, and so on and so forth, you will definitely recognize certain data quality improvements. Why? Because being able to control certain defects in the beginning, you will reduce the systematic issues. And that's what actually RBM is also about, is to be able to eliminate the systematic errors. Be just not focused on random errors. The random errors will happen anyway, but systematic issues is that what you can deal and you can improve. So be sure by implementing in a holistic way the risk-based monitoring, you will see data quality improvements. You will see improvements in frequency of on-site visits, and you would ask me, okay, we would have certain cost improvements here. Definitely, yes, but you would need another investments. For example, in methodology, in implementation of SOPs, in a change management, these all procedures that need a new investments, and they will, unfortunately, they will get rid of any of cost savings, so they will reduce any cost savings which you will get by reducing the frequency of on-site visits. You will see protocol deviation improvements. You will see more natural and more so let's say better reporting of adverse events and serious adverse events. What does it mean? It's another topic. It's probably worth of another webinar. But under-reporting and over-reporting of adverse events, that's what you will be able to control after implementing of RBM. You will have less site audit findings, and you will have a reduction in loss to follow-up, just because sites will be more engaged, just because these engagement will be more, you will see this engagement, that patient will be more engaged, and that's all reduces the loss to follow-up ratios. Somebody was asking about Spotfire and other vendors. I've tried to plot different vendors on two graphs. So you will see RBM vendors based on the dependence and independence, and those who are focused on RBM and or who are focused on general business intelligence. Spotfire, for example, is one of the tools that is typical BI solution. It could be applied for RBM, it could be applied for other issues, but it will not provide you the holistic approach of RBM. For example, it has no risk assessment mechanisms inside, it has no issue management inside, it has no kappa inside, it has no communication about risks inside, and so on and so forth. So it is a nice dashboard presentation which you can utilize, but it's only part of the whole procedure. Dependent providers, why they are called dependent, they are more connected with the certain activities in clinical trials. For example, with the data acquisition or with the project management, like Quintiles, Bioclinica, ICON, they are all CROs that are connected with the project management. And Medidata or ERT, they are more connected with the data acquisition. So they all claim that they provide RBM now. Just be sure that if you will take the dependent solution, you will face conflict of interests. So that means that those companies who are assessing their activities will be not easily communicate the sloppiness and the problems that what they were resulting. And please be sure that a conflict of interest is definitely something you need to be aware about in risk management. So when dealing with the risks, with the controlling of risks, be sure that the parties who are involved in that are free of conflict of interests. And independent solutions are providing the RBM solutions in an independent way, which are free of this conflict of interests. Just let us skip a couple of slides. I wanted to say a couple of words about fraud detection, but we are a bit. Let us just summarize what it would bring you if you would start implementing the RBM, or if you started already, what it will bring you for your operations. Result number one, which you will definitely see, is that you will get categorized your sites: high risk sites, medium risk sites, low risk sites. This is already a huge advantage, which will help you in optimizing your monitoring activities. You will see definitely an improvement in data quality because, again, you will mitigate systematic issues that provide dirty data. And that's what you will recognize in a lower number of queries. You recognize in the better statistical, in better chances to reach statistical significance, and in a smaller confidence intervals. So this is what you definitely will observe. You will see that you start the next trial not from zero, but from already knowledge base that you bring from the previous trial. And that's a so-called continuous improvement methodology, Kaizen. Maybe you've heard about this from Japan, and that's why we all like Japanese cars, because they are so reliable. Because of this Kaizen methodology, continuous improvement, each of this type of the car accumulated the whole knowledge of the whole mistakes of the previous cars. And the same in clinical trials, you will accumulate the knowledge in a certain knowledge basis and start the new trial with the information about risks and about performance of your previous trials, of your sites, and mitigation actions which worked the best previously. And you will face an environment that knowledge sharing will be quite common thing. We know that many CROs and many pharma companies work in silos. They have certain therapy area silo, or they have certain isolated groups that work really without benefiting of knowledge of the other groups. And that's where risk management and centralized monitoring can be also a helping mechanism. So it brings everybody again to a certain intellectual network. When everybody is connected with each other, you see the dynamics of the trials, and you can forecast the same dynamics in another trials. Or you see certain difficulties and solutions in one trial, and you can transport these solutions to another trial and bring these solutions to less experienced employees. When we speak about number of SDV rates, you will definitely SDV error rate, SDV versus error rates. You will see certain improvements. You will see certain improvements in error rates overall, and definitely some cost reductions are connected with that. But as I said, maybe on later stages. Here's another graph which shows how your monitoring activities could be designed. So here's the classical monitoring that's starts and ends at the end, and here's more adaptive and more reflective, proactive monitoring scheduling. So you have a bigger portion in the beginning, but then it reduces, and really only triggers when you should do certain monitoring activities. So that's where you definitely see certain improvements. And of course, there are some value proposition for pharma companies, value proposition from CRO companies, and for vendors, but that's what we unfortunately don't have too much time for. I will be able to provide these slides for everybody who is in the call, but you need to actively ask for and provide your email for that. Otherwise, I will not be able to send it to you. So if I will summarize the value proposition for pharma companies, that the trial in general gets more, goes in a more predictable way. So the trial itself, so to say, has more predictable start and end. CRAs get the advantages that they can work from home, they can work from a centralized place, and jump on a train only when it's needed. You have improvements in data quality, you have certain performance improvements in monitoring activities. So one monitor can capture more and can cover more clinical trials. It doesn't mean that it's a jeopardy or a danger for them as a job. It means that their job will be more interesting. We will have risk profiles for sites. These risk profiles are available for the sites themselves, and they could even utilize this information to argue that they are high-level sites. That's why probably they need they charge more than others, for example. I want to summarize everything what I said. We started with why RBMS actually appeared on our landscape. We decided to dig down inside and see what we understand under this term. We saw that there are different approaches how to tackle that. We saw that a lot of vendors who suggest that. Some of them are like dependent, some of them are less dependent. We saw that there are some certain advantages, but these advantages are not directly connected with or shouldn't be triggered by cost-saving motives behind. More by a motivation to reduce the uncertainty and to reduce the risk in your trial. And I want to say last final quote, which I like very much, from Irving Fisher. He said, risk varies inversely with knowledge. The more we understand, the more we know about how we drive, how we fly in a trial, the more predictable will trial be, and the less risks we will face. So by saying that, I really appreciate your time today. I will address the rest of the questions right now. So if you will be not available, I absolutely understand. For those who are leaving now, thank you for participating today. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact me. And all my contacts are available in the group where we are, or on our website, integrity.com. So saying some words, asking the questions, yes, is it possible to share the slides? Yes, I can share the slides. Please, if you use the slides later, don't forget to put reference. That would be I would be very thankful for that. What are the just I cannot read the question when some new messages appear. So regarding the reduction of on-site monitoring visits and greater on-site visits interval with RBM, this cannot be considered an absolute measure of efficiency, since it doesn't necessarily mean a reduction of monitoring activities. What are your thoughts? My thoughts are in this regard that monitoring activities, so every monitor has a certain tool set that they apply. So, and a visit to a site is one of these tools, so to say. And when we speak about connecting these tools with the risks, that's where we speak about certain optimizations, and that's absolutely not the absolute measure of efficiency. Important is to be clear what your targets are when you start RBM initiative in your trial. So just put certain KPIs, what you are going to achieve. Measure these KPIs from your previous trials, and then set up certain expectations. Measure them during your trial. For example, you could say we wish to reduce number of queries. It's absolutely reasonable approach. And then track this KPI and see how your risk mitigation activities and more optimized monitoring helped to reduce your number of queries. Or you can say we wish to measure, for example, number of on-site visits. Again, you just remember those slides which I showed you. You can do more optimized on-site visits. Again, important to understand what you're willing to achieve, to put a KPI for that, to measure that, and to communicate successes or failures openly within your team, just to react accordingly. When I was saying that RBM brings, or risk management brings their own risks, I really mean that, and I really saw this in many companies. That's why I do advise to invite certain experts who have done already several projects connected with RBM, and they will definitely help you avoid certain pitfalls. Okay. Do you have experience with risk-based monitoring across trials? Very good question. Actually, one of the projects that we fulfilled was particularly across the trials. First of all, measuring the risks and measuring the advantages that it brings. Particularly also involving the risk indicators connected with the cultural differences, where you will see certain cultural dynamics. For example, reporting of adverse events in Japan is quite different to reporting of adverse events in, for example, in America. It's connected with the culture, it's connected with the legal background, and making these measurements across trials will help you to be prepared to these cultural differences in the future. So, and be prepared to design your trial in such a way that you will mitigate these risks as well. So I hope I answered this question. So very much would appreciate these slides. Okay, the audio connection was quite poor. Sorry for that. The recording as well. Yeah, we will provide recording. Yeah, so I see that there are certain follow-up questions. How easy it's in your experience to establish data sharing agreements with sponsors to implement RBM? Oh, good question. Actually, not easy. Absolutely not easy. Every sponsor considers their data as a kind of their property, and that's absolutely, it's absolutely okay. What sponsor is not doesn't understand usually is that we are not in a competition of risks. Just again, if we will make a parallel example with the airwaves, certain crashes will be communicated immediately among industry, and this will be immediately provided. So Airbus or Boeing, they will immediately get the full report why certain crash happened. I would wish if that would happen in pharma as well. For example, if a certain fraud and misconduct happened by Novartis, everybody gets a kind of information and the method how to be protected from that. Why I'm saying Novartis, just recently in 2013, they had certain issues with the fraud with the medication Diovan. Maybe you've heard about it. So answering your question, it's not easy, but it moves to the right direction. So many of the sponsors get understanding that sharing certain risk-relevant information will benefit the whole industry. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for a good presentation. How possible to identify fraud? Oh, that's a very good question, and it's a big question. We've done several days educational sessions only about fraud detection. I'm not sure I would like to start this discussion right now. If you wish to talk about fraud detection, maybe let us connect separately and plan maybe a separate event about it. It's very important and very large topic, how to deal with the fraud, how to identify fraud before it becomes a problem. And there are lots of methods for that. They are well established. They are very scientifically grounded. We have these methods from different industries, and we adapted and implemented them for clinical trials. So if you have interest, maybe let's plan another session for that. I hope I answered many questions. I really enjoyed that everybody stayed active. I really enjoyed that I hope that it was beneficial for all of us. And if you have further questions, please visit our site. Our newsletter speaks about our events. We usually do webinars for different topics, and it could be very beneficial for everybody of us. Is there new software available? Yes, there are a lot of software packages available on the market. Some software packages provide with integrity. Many other vendors specialize. Each of the software package has their strengths and weaknesses, and maybe you need to be aware about that. And if you wish, I could share some information about their strengths and weaknesses in the private sessions again. I have a couple of articles I could provide to you. There are some free software packages as well. That's what we can definitely discuss. I wish everybody Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and I hope to see you in the future year. And I wish that we all get protected from the risks in the new year. Thank you very much. Thank you.